Okay, welcome everyone to this session on the different facets of a Salesforce enterprise usage. And my name's Dave Horton from Odaseva, running this panel today. And I'm very pleased to introduce a number of guests with us. We have Anil Sisler, Jonathan Siprick, Niels Brian Lowe, and Kevin Schmaltz. And what I'll do is actually open up to the team so they can introduce themselves, where they work, what their area of speciality is, and then we'll go straight into the questions. So I'll start with Anil. Can you please give yourself an introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Dave, and pleasure to meet you all. I'm Anil Sisler. I'm the platform lead for global Salesforce implementation within Schneider. I'm responsible for the global architecture, the scalability, and the sustainability of the platform within Schneider Electric. And I also manage the platforms like Odaseva, which are kind of within the Salesforce ecosystem that we manage within Schneider.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Siprick. I'm the Associate Vice President at Manulife Canada, responsible and accountable for most of the shared platforms within the platforms that drive marketing enablement, sales enablement, service and operations enablement, and that includes Salesforce.
Thank you, Jonathan. Niels?
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Niels Brian Lowe. I'm the Salesforce Platform Director at Capgemini. We're a 270,000 person global system integrator. I'm responsible for Salesforce in all its platform as a service context. So that's core platform, some MuleSoft, Heroku, and now even Slack. So excited to be here. Many thanks.
Thank you, Niels. Kevin, lastly.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to be joined by such an amazing crew over there. So I'm Kevin Schmaltz. I'm a director for product management at Odaseva. I'm in charge of the roadmap for Odaseva, working with the development team here in France. And Odaseva, as you know, is an enterprise solution for data protection for Salesforce. And so we're really glad to be here on that call with partners, with customers. So thank you all for joining.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can go straight into a couple of questions around, your specific use cases and also specific challenges. Each of you work in different industries, so it's going to be interesting to see how the perspective differs between each of you. So, in terms of some of the technical challenges, one of the questions that I'm keen to ask is, how have you managed to have enterprise scale in your Salesforce usage? And that question I might take to Niels to start with. Obviously a very large organization. I'm really keen to understand, what does it mean to Capgemini to have enterprise scale in your usage?
Well, I mean, the key for us is obviously the enterprise scale of our customers. And I think if I only have one claim to fame, it's that I've spent 20 years in the Salesforce ecosystem of Salesforce's 21 years of life. And the key trend over that period was that Salesforce started as a technology that was very well suited to small and medium enterprises. Data volumes were low. Multi-tenancy was not tended to be thrashed to its limits because the enterprises that were using them were relatively small. They were tended to be using them for a single line of business. So the problem statement around enterprise scale was relatively limited. I mean, it's Dreamforce week this week, and I remember being in Dreamforce maybe 5 or 6 years ago when Mark Benioff announced that only they now had 10 or something customers generating more than $10 million of business. And that world has changed. Enterprises are using Salesforce at scale, and that causes all kinds of technical issues, from large data volumes to data lifecycle management to DevOps processes. It's a different world, and this technology has kept pace with that. But we're in a new world of enterprise usage of Salesforce. Salesforce has also grown massively and now encompasses all kinds of acquisitions, including recently Slack, Tableau, Demandware. This is an ecosystem of platforms, not just a single platform being used in an enterprise context. And that kind of scale brings challenges and new opportunities. And it's been an exciting time, but scale is something that the customers and Salesforce are challenged with, and we as a system integrator are delighted to be able to help our customers overcome these and to use applications and platforms like Odaseva to overcome some of the key sticking points in that enterprise scale.
Wonderful, thank you, Niels. And maybe a question to Jonathan. Obviously, being in financial services, is there anything interesting from your perspective on the challenges that you face being enterprise scale with Salesforce in the financial services industry?
Yeah, certainly. Just adding on to those comments, I think that there's so many organizations and smaller organizations, whether it's small business or medium business, that is successful running Salesforce end to end. And I think the differentiator at enterprise scale is the amount of things that are needed to really run the machine in terms of collections and teams of product owners and the contention that you can run into. I think that there's a collection of different strategies that large enterprise have, everything from having org proliferation that happen naturally, or the fewer number of orgs the better, and so with that you end up with significant DevOps challenges in terms of being able to at runtime the things that you need are great because Salesforce has taken care of that for you. But some of the challenges that are around organization of how do you manage when you have dozens and dozens of people that all want to touch, the case object in Salesforce and not break the call center on a daily basis, right? So some of the things that you run into around value quantification, making sure that risk and regulatory requirements are met. Salesforce has done an amazing job of addressing what's needed for large enterprise, and but there is complexity at scale, and I think that can keep things very interesting, but could also certainly slow down enterprise. There's trade-offs for sure.
And taking it to Anil, I mean, from your perspective, what are some of the positive surprises or negative surprises that you've seen using Salesforce at scale within Schneider Electric?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So adding on to what Niels and Jonathan mentioned, right? The large data volumes always bring up certain challenges for you that you need to take care of, right? And if you don't take care of them, you may potentially be risking out the efficiency of your teams that are leveraging the platform, because the time it takes to load the data, or the time it takes for them to bring up the data to serve the customer who is on the call, it's probably going to impact for you, right? And then over a period of time, you don't realize that data keeps generating. So you need to have an efficient way to be able to manage the data so that your users are able to access the platform efficiently. And this is one of the challenges that we always run into, right? Salesforce also brings in the additional flexibility that you can run the reporting on the same platform on the transactional data. So when you really look at the data that's powering the transactions, when you look at the data that's powering the reporting, it's on the large volume data, it becomes a whole gamut that you have to handle. And these are some of the positives that we were able to bring in, that we could enable the users to use and report off the data, operationally. At the same time, it was also throwing us certain performance and scalability challenges, and that's the thing that we needed to handle without impacting the user experience. So it's always been, how do you find that balance to ensure that everyone is able to get the best value out of the platform?
And maybe a question to Kevin. Obviously, you can speak to the size and scale of some of the companies that you've consulted with, but kind of what is the rhetoric that you've heard from customers around size and scale, and to Anil's point, having that balance?
Yeah, I think we're in a very interesting position that I found that is really amazing. Like, we partner with very large organizations that have massive Salesforce implementation. At the same time, we're also Salesforce users on our side. Like, we actually have like what we would consider ourselves like a mid to large size Salesforce org that we manage every day on which the platform runs. So there's like we see every day the little challenges, but we also hear and discuss with our customers their challenge. I think that the thing that was the most interesting to me, being like a long-time partner with those organizations, is that we've seen a lot of different development teams, different projects succeed each other over time. And so on these orgs that stays there, and the partner like the ISV like us actually is the thing that is staying constant over time, which is we extract the data. We try to be able to be super ready for the restoration of that data. That is a data model that is changing, especially over the span of 5 years or something like this. It is a massive changes that we see in our customers. And so I think something that was very interesting that I didn't consider before on enterprise scale was the diversity of coding practices, of architectural practices that succeed each other over time on these orgs. And you have certain parts of the data model that go stale and is not used anymore, but the data is still here, to Wendell's point. And same for the actual code that is deployed there and creating data, where the stuff that some people today at our customers don't really know how this particular thing runs, and there's no one that really knows. Like, you need to go get back into it and learn about that code base and readapt it if you need to do something. So that was really interesting to see how like a massive application like this can, even with SaaS, can be partly stale, partly super fresh with new products.
Thank you, Kevin. And I guess coming to the next question on the App Exchange, as I mentioned, you're all in fairly interesting and diverse organizations and in industries. Does anybody have any perspective on, what is unique about your organization and your organization's complexity when it comes to working with App Exchange partners? Niels, I know you mentioned a number of partners that you're working with there, but is there something that you can contribute to that question?
Well, I mean, I think for us and for our customers, the value of the App Exchange is the ability to accelerate time to value. So we're a global consultancy helping our customers extract the maximum value from their Salesforce investment that we can, and we're doing that definitionally at enterprise scale, because all of our customers are enterprise scale customers, and they are inherently looking for how they can accelerate time to value. And one of the reasons they choose a system integrator like us is we bring knowledge capital and IP to the table. We bring accelerators and ways of making this happen faster and more efficiently for our customers. But the App Exchange also provides the perfect platform for standing on the shoulders of giants and bringing the knowledge capital, all of Salesforce and Salesforce's ecosystem to bear. So we, effectively, with a click of a few buttons, you can deploy a solution to a problem. And Odaseva is a great example of that. So definitely the App Exchange is a key and fundamental part of what's made Salesforce successful.
Any other comments from anyone else?
Well, I think as Neil mentioned, right, it's not, in addition to bringing the time to the reducing the lead time, it's also important that, being able to do it repetitively, and securely and fast is also equally important. So it's not just about the lead time to deliver or the lead time to serve. It's also about, how secure your solution is. So most of these App Exchange products also come in with certain security controls that you can take advantage of, because they go through this security review process before they get listed on the platform, and then you also, most of these ISV partners also have their own security, teams or CISO teams put in place to kind of ensure that whatever the capabilities that you are bringing on or augmenting your Salesforce implementation, bring in those inherent security capabilities that you can leverage on, right? It's because what you need to look at and what you should not be overseeing is the customer data that you're putting in your Salesforce instance. And it's very important to secure that customer data to build the trust with your customer, right? And the way you build the trust is to demonstrate that your platforms are secure. You demonstrate that your platforms are resilient. you demonstrate that your platforms are, scalable enough and available for you to operate.
I'd like to add just another comment as something also, which is the buy versus build debate of understanding when you should subscribe to innovation with an AppExchange partner versus, what are the criteria for your own engineering teams to be able to make an investment because it's proprietary to your business, something that is part of your value proposition that you want to create and you want to own, versus the benefits of being able to subscribe to something, have rapid time to value, but may or may not, be the right fit. And so there's that important debate. I think in my years, I've seen a lot of sort of unnecessary development and different places where you can simply subscribe to something. Although, running the long-term cost analysis and understanding what's there, making sure that you have the right price point for the right solution is really important, but also making sure that in terms of if you're going to build something and engineer something, the long-term cost of ownership of that, making sure that's well understood, because often that is more expensive than simply subscribing to a partner.
Yeah, and I think to add to Neil's point also about what makes Salesforce great is the AppExchange being able to deploy these solutions very quickly. We found ourselves many times in a situation where it was a stretch for the organization to acquire Salesforce as a SaaS in the first place. From a security perspective, from a procurement perspective, etc. It was really a new domain for them to acquire a solution like this compared to on-premise solution that they were used to buying. And so when it comes to then purchasing AppExchange solution, then it's nowhere to be seen. And thankfully with Odaseva, we got to the level where we have the security certifications, we have all of the documentation that those large companies really want to see, but being forced to produce that to actually implement a solution, I think for those large organizations makes Salesforce slightly less appealing compared to the base value of, well, you can get on the AppExchange and install something, or at least prototype something, or that friction. If for large organization, if you manage to reduce it, there's a lot of value in getting in the AppExchange to find a way, like a short path to acquiring a solution on the AppExchange. And definitely we've seen various things with customers where some of them are very quick, and some others where it's a very long process, very similar if they were buying another SaaS the size of Salesforce. So it's a very interesting domain of being in the AppExchange in that regard.
To Jonathan's point as well, I mean, this buy versus build debate kind of throws up an existential question for customers, and that's what are the value props that they should own proprietarily that drive their business and what don't, because that translates in technical terms into what are you going to house in your systems of record, and how are you going to separate your systems of record from your systems of differentiation, and then at the top of the pyramid, what are you going to do with your systems of innovation? So the modern enterprise is looking at those three different tiers and deciding its enterprise architecture around these three different tiers, and each enterprise has got its own decision to make there, but the question of buy versus build is part of an existential question about what is it that an individual enterprise does that actually adds value, and therefore where does it need to bring proprietary innovation, and where can it just leverage existing capabilities or AppExchange products or existing code bases, whatever it may be. And clearly in some of the more success-orientated platform contexts like DevOps and data lifecycle, it tends to make more sense to rest on the shoulders of giants that already exist rather than try and innovate that stuff from scratch. But the idea is that you leave capacity and engineering capability and mental bandwidth free in order to then focus on your systems of innovation and your value props as an enterprise. So these technical questions interleave quite tightly with the existential questions about what the enterprise is doing and why it's doing it.
And just to add on to what Niels and Jonathan said, it's not just about you bring in the capability, it's also about being able to sustain it for the long run, right? So when you're really looking at the buy versus build, it's not just about on the day that you're buying, you're looking at, but how you want to sustain to be able to serve your business in a cost-efficient manner. So that becomes another critical element for you to look at when you are actually looking at these solutions end to end.
Yeah, excellent points here. And I guess, you know, being quite scientific about this question, but is there some kind of approval process, or is there a scientific measure that would help you understand whether it's a buy solution or whether it's a build solution when you're looking at the App Exchange and kind of the comparative solution to your problem?
Well, I don't think there's a silver bullet here, right? So I think each organization has a way to kind of look at what their process is, right? You know, for example, one of the way that we look at is a pretty methodical approach, right? It's not just about you just go and buy something off the shelf, right? You would be looking at what exactly you're trying to achieve and what's your, you know, the strategic objective that you're trying to achieve. Then you come and look at, you know, what are the capabilities that can, you know, that are already existing in the marketplace. Then you look at what are the capabilities that you already have in-house, and then be able to, you know, do some sort of like a prototyping / piloting to see, you know, how soon or how fast you can deliver the solution using the custom development versus bring something off the shelf, and then be able to, you know, determine what's your scope of key use cases that you're trying to achieve. And you look at it from a holistic standpoint. And based on the pilot outcomes, then you decide whether you want to scale up or not, right? And that gives you, as part of the pilot outcome, you're not just looking at whether have I achieved the functional requirements or the business requirements, you're also looking at the cost element of it to say whether is it, you know, what's my cost to serve, and what's my, you know, the total run cost if I have to move forward. It's not just about serve today, but also to serve over the period of years. So, and then that kind of becomes a, you know, kind of like a baseline for you to say, okay, bring in, look at all the possible players in the marketplace, put them across, you know, the criteria that you want to measure, and then you determine whether you want to scale up or not. So it's one of the approach that we typically apply, you know, not necessarily the only approach that you have in the marketplace or in the out there in the industry. But I've also come across, you know, talking to experts, you know, talking to, you know, the experts on the call, is that you also have other approaches that each of the companies kind of customizing based on their needs.
I think there's another factor, which is it's easy to proliferate and simply subscribe to apps, and it can get away on you. I think that there's a couple in terms of, you know, buying versus build. You know, certainly in large enterprise, it's quite easy for folks to say, hey, there's a solution, I'm going to buy that, and it's going to give me everything that I need. And as that continually happens, you can end up with a pretty big and sort of somewhat redundant basket of applications. And sometimes there is also a place of keeping it simple and not over-delivering and subscribing to something. And sometimes the answer is, you know, make a small investment, do not subscribe to all the bells and whistles that you may need, and simply, you know, keep it simple and scrappy and do something that you can sustain affordably. And in those cases, there are places where maybe you just want to build a small app on Salesforce without an App Exchange partner. And that takes discipline to say, I can subscribe to that, but not always, right?
Additionally, the notion of buy versus build assumes an automated bifurcation, and that this is a binary set of outcomes. The reality of enterprise software development, of enterprise platform, is that, you know, you may be buying something and have to build on it or build with it. You may be building something and you may be buying a component of the building. It's much more of a continuum than a straightforward, you know, binary outcome. So the questions also become more complex. To Anil's point, you know, this isn't a simple, you know, simple do I buy it, do I build it? This is how does the built part of it fit into a partly bought strategy? I mean, it's a hybrid, right? And how you manage that hybrid is the key. The other thing is that, you know, typically with software development, we're looking at value. You know, we're driving everything by how much value can we create by doing this? Can we cut in cost? Are we driving top line? Whatever the business outcome we're trying to go towards is. One of the complexities that I think enterprise customers quite often struggle with is that you've also got some platform underpinnings. You have infrastructure you need to build, and doing the ROI calculations or the value creations on the on the underlying platform plumbing is sometimes complex, because typically IT is involved in those sorts of decisions and that sort of activity, whereas the business outcome stuff tends to be more at the application layer, at the software development layer, where you start to do straightforward ROI analyses of activities. So there is complexity when you're looking at whether you're building platform infrastructure or building at the application layer, and something like Salesforce starts to merge those two concepts together. So there is complexity, and there aren't silver bullet answers, and it's probably a continuum rather than a one or the other. The world is complex, I think, is the point I'm making.
I mean, to your point, I think something that is definitely underestimated is at the scale we're talking about in enterprise software in general. There's no buy solution. It's always buy, then build on top of it, because there's so many integrations and things to work through that it's never only a buy compared to your mindset of like, oh, I'm going to buy that small thing, it's going to do everything for me and my coffee also. It's never going to be like this. And so, yeah, it's always a matter of like, how much build do you want to do? Do you want to do all the base as well, or do you want to do just the configuration on top of it? And I think that's in the end, especially with the scale that we're talking about here, it's never a case of only buy, never.
And I think a lot of the comments seem to be based on experience, maybe a war story or two in the past of a purchase that has got out of hand very quickly. But without naming names or without being specific, are there any cautionary tales that you can tell from your experience with the ecosystem and the App Exchange as to some of the lessons learned that you might be able to bestow on the viewers of this particular webinar? Any takers? It's a brave one to go in for.
It's not exactly like it's gone bad, but I think the technology is evolving so fast. So probably what you have bought 5 years back is not valid anymore for you, right? Your business is transforming, your customers are transforming. You need to, in order to serve your customers, you need to ensure that you're transforming your applications, your systems. And over a course of period of time, probably whatever you might have bought at that time may not be relevant for you anymore. So I wouldn't certainly say that it's like a gone bad situation, but it's more, given the changing landscape, you always need to put a perspective in your process to see, okay, is it still relevant for us? Is it really yielding what we want to get out of it? Or is it something that you have to make a hard decision and look for an alternative, right? So at least the perspective that we always put across is this, not necessarily that, it's gone bad. Yes, there would be instances potentially that things may have gone bad, but that's where you kind of, preempt all that by doing that pilot approach, because it's a massive investment for bigger companies, right? Instead of you trying to go down the path and then realize it a year later, you probably, reduce the scope of where you want to evaluate and see whether it's going to work for you in that piloting approach, and then determine, in a more pragmatic way of whether you really want to take it at scale within your enterprise versus no, it's not going to work for me because of so and so reasons. It could be cost, it could be, the lead time, or it could be the challenges in terms of security or deployments or whatever, right? And then you can preempt all that by using this piloting approach. I mean, that's how, at least at an enterprise scale, you can kind of have or minimize the disruptions that you can potentially cause downstream, rather doing that at the later point in time, you bring them, further up.
I think something that's worth noting as well from a technical standpoint is that when you're doing anything with an App Exchange product, you're either throwing off under the hood, you're throwing off metadata, or you're throwing off Apex code. I mean, if you build a flow in Salesforce and what it's really doing underneath the hood is generating Apex code. And all of this configuration and pointy click style implementation gives a false sense of reassurance that everything will work and work as suggested. And I think, you know, one of the learnings is that clearly that's not the case. I mean, you can break anything on the Salesforce platform declaratively if you want to, in the same way you could break it with Apex. And when you've got coders developing, you know, high-performing development teams developing in Apex or Java or whatever language they're writing in, they tend to follow a certain rigor to unit testing in real time that you don't necessarily see followed when people think they're just buying a solution off the shelf, clicking and implementing it. And I think it's sometimes important to remember that what's going on underneath the hood is Apex or metadata, and you know, some of the same rigors of testing. And I think this piloting issue is a kind of, you know, precursor to the testing. You know, pilot to find out, and test and test and test and test some more. And I think the same rigors of software development need to be deployed at enterprise scale when you're doing declarative configuration with other platforms, other AppExchange products, as they would if you had a team of developers sitting around with an IDE ready to crank out code.
I guess that brings us on to an interesting topic around the Salesforce ecosystem, is the staffing, and, you know, hiring, motivating, and retaining those technical employees that are helping to implement these solutions. You know, in terms of enterprise scale, you know, is there also a challenge in assembling and retaining that strong team to support those critical applications? Maybe Jonathan, did you want to speak to kind of how you operate with your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been very successful in growing and sustaining a very large Salesforce team. We do that in a number of ways. One is we have a full-time employee-based team that we manage, but along with that, we have strategic partners that we work with, and we very much create long-term, persistently funded teams. And there's no, I mean, there's benefits to being an employee and benefits to being a consultant, but we really run those teams as single teams with total trust, and we set an expectation for ongoing learning and development. And in the past years, we have done many years of competitions where across different Manulife segments, we will create sort of incentivized competitions where teams will rely on each other for being able to deliver, you know, trailhead, you know, badge counts and certification counts, and you know, some of that has created amazing and just spectacular results. And unofficially, I'm pretty certain that we're likely Canada's most accredited Salesforce customer for Canada as a result of teams, you know, battling it out to get 13 certifications, that kind of thing, right? So it has create those types of competitions, and making time for learning, and making sure that it's very clear what the expectations are for performance, and investing in yourself it just has such a great ROI to it from a business point of view. But most importantly, it creates trust for the team, and team members want to stay. So I can say that we really don't have, you know, there's with the Great Resignation in the last 2 years rippling across North America. You know, I've been very grateful that the team has really maintained through the challenges of working largely remotely for everyone. We've been very successful in maintaining our team and the organization that we've worked hard to build over the last 5 years.
And Niels or Anil, did you have, you know, any different perspective on how your teams you know, continue to learn with Salesforce?
Well, adding on to what Jonathan said, right? Like, if you really look at our journey, we have been leveraging the platform, and our Salesforce teams have been around for 10 years, right? We started off with a small team of about, you know, 5 people, and today we are probably close to, you know, 10 to 15 times of that. You know, our team size is 10 to 15 times of what we started off with, right? And as Jonathan mentioned, we also use a combination of, you know, the employees and the service partners that are coming in who are helping us on our implementations, right? So it's always a mixture, and the key element that you have is the trust, right? So you're never seeing that, you are a different, person from a partner, or you're a person from Schneider. It doesn't happen that way, right? It's always one team, and that's what helps you bring the trust, right? And then you have that right mixture, because Salesforce is an evolving platform. If you really look at the way Salesforce operates, is that their platform is evolving every, once every 3 months, 3 times a year, right? So there's always a constant learning that you have to do, impart to your teams. And this is where how you take advantage of your service partners whom you're trusting to help bring in that, because there's a strong partner network that Salesforce is having with their partners, and you're partnering with those service partners, and they're bringing in that, the new enhancements that the Salesforce is releasing, and the new capabilities that Salesforce is releasing, and then you're kind of helping your teams to grow. So it's not just your service partners who are growing along with those service partners, you're also having your teams to grow along. And I think that makes the whole, different equation of the way how you're managing your teams.
I mean, from our perspective, there's clearly a global skills shortage. You've got we're on a global hunt for talent always. The market is growing faster than we can acquire talent. We've built an incredible network of global talent supported by 3 global COEs that invest a great deal of time, money, and effort in ensuring that our teams stay skilled up, that we bring teams in from other technologies to get skilled up in the Salesforce space, that we can work with our clients to jointly drive intellectual capital and knowledge capital and stay ahead of the curve. But it's a the rate of growth of the Salesforce ecosystem. 20 years ago, in 20 years, they've created an organization with a market capitalization of $250 billion. They've grown quickly, they're acquiring quickly, and keeping abreast of that with the skills that are required is a tough business, whether it's done through acquisition or organically or both. And that's true if you're a system integrator like us, and I imagine it's also a challenge for customers as well. But it's an exciting market to be in, and the platform itself is full of such wonderful innovation that it's a joy to work with people who also are excited by it and see the potential. So good skills are hard to come by, but it's a great place to come and work. So that's my little plug for Capgemini, by the way. If anybody wants to, anybody watching this, they're at App Innovation, is looking for a great career. Obviously, Capgemini is the first stop.
My team is hiring too, so please join Odaseva as well. But to that point, because the topic of the event being, App Exchange and apps, I think that's also our role. Like, we don't often think about it like this, but at Odaseva, with the amount of skills and knowledge we have in our technical architect team, etc., we always strive to be helping the teams, because we have a very unique perspective on Salesforce and the Salesforce API with the type of data processing on top of Salesforce we do. So usually when we interact with our customers, or even in pre-sales or situations, there's a lot of good exchange that happens on these topics, because we see things differently on the Salesforce platform, trying to extract all of the data from that platform regularly. It's a challenge, and we learn a lot of things on how to handle the APIs and those type of things. So usually it's a part where I think large organization can definitely leverage not only consulting partners, but also the partners from the App Exchange and the solution that they have purchased for expertise and knowledge on certain aspects of the ecosystem. It's so big, right? The Salesforce platform is so big that there's really not enough point of views in general to learn from. And even with Trailhead and those type of things, when you do some searches on Google on certain errors that you get in Salesforce, it doesn't return much, because we need even more people on the platform to test those different use cases and to write about it.
Okay, well, I think we're nearly at time, so I'll leave one kind of wrap-up question. I'll go around the table, but if you had one wish for the Salesforce App Exchange program, what would it be for your particular organization? And we'll start with Anil.
It's a tricky question, Dave, that you put across, right? So there's, it's really challenging, given especially for the large enterprises, right? When you're really looking at the large enterprise, there's not a single thing that you probably are not going to be touching on, right? Depending on, what's the scope of your Salesforce implementation that you're looking at, So you could be looking at an array of app exchanges, right? I think one of the things that we always look for is it's not just about are you listed on the app exchange, but also how fast as an app exchange partner you're innovating, right? Because that's what is really going to make you more successful. And that's what it's going to make the enterprises like us that who are using those app exchange apps also more successful, be able to deliver solutions faster. So whenever we are always looking for things which are not just what you offer today, but also, how fast you're being able to look at, new or bringing on new features to the table, which can make that differential offering that you can provide to your customers.
Great point. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think the app exchange is mature. So the area that I would love to see, and I wish that there was innovation in, is sort of providing partners with better revenue models and different revenue models than the three core models that are available to partners, and having more creativity there. And so in terms of being able to create and subscribe to products slightly differently, where a couple decades ago it started with number of seats per user-based licensing, whatever it is. Here's each user gets this and it costs that. Or you end up with a single type of purchase where you pay by the org or something like that. There's a couple other models, but they're not creative in terms of allowing enterprise to be able to grow into different types of products differently in a different type of revenue model that can be a win-win for both large customers, all customers of different sizes, but in terms of looking at utilization and usage in a different way, and opening that as part of subscribing to different ways as opposed to number of users or a single procurement line item, right? Usage-based consumption is something I think there's a lot of room for.
Yeah, interesting point. Niels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point I'd make is a lot of the boring back office stuff. It's the ability to get an app onto the App Exchange is wonderfully easy, but the ability to have a product that has documentation, support, testing, all of the things that you might need to couple it to an enterprise situation. As Anil said earlier, not just once, but for the long run, for the life cycle of that tool, that product, that platform, it requires a lot of very dull back office style stuff. The billing being part of it, and the billing methods, and support services, and all these things. But these are things that actually create value or decrease cost over time. Just creating some code, sticking a shiny label on it, and publishing on the App Exchange is step one. That's a necessary but not sufficient condition for creating truly differentiating products.
Okay, and lastly, Kevin, any final remarks?
Well, it's exactly the same as Niels is. It's very easy to push on the App Exchange, and it's very monodimensional when you look at the App Exchange, just a list of solutions that is out there. So I think bringing more depth on how it scales, to millions or billions of records, and all of the service that you would expect from an enterprise solution compared to a solution that is nice for developers only or something like that. That I think it would be a good addition to the App Exchange.
Wonderful. Well, I think we're at time right now. So I'd like to thank Anil, Jonathan, Niels, and also Kevin for joining today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.